Hey, this is Shane. I wanted to welcome you to another episode of Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. This episode, we're talking with Mark Pellegrini, who is a writer, all-around cool dude, and a quote-unquote horror bottomless pit. And we have a nice chat on horror movies and with sort of a focus on found footage movies, which has become an interest of mine over the past 2 or 3 years. In fact, there's a list I've published of well over 100 found footage movies that I've watched and reviewed that we'll talk about during the episode. But we talk about what makes found footage different from other types of movies, horror franchises that forget their roots, horror films adapted into series, overlooked horror gems in the slasher genre, analog horror, Halloween Kills, and what makes Michael Myers scary, and how the Halloween franchise went way off the rails before the 2018 restart. The Burning versus Friday the 13th versus Sleepaway Camp. What's the deal with the hockey mask in the Alone in the Dark movie from 1982? Romero's zombie rules and social commentary. And heck, let's throw in a little J-horror too. We also have a little bit of discussion of Mark's writing and his comics work, including Kamen America and Black Ops. So sit back, enjoy the show, and away we go.
Shall we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky and little rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for tuning in, for listening via podcast even. Shane Plays, as I like to say, it's not just like playing games, although I cover a lot of game content on this channel. It's when I geek out. It's when I get into the things that I love to geek out about. And this episode, we're doing sort of a Halloween-themed episode. We're going to talk about horror movies, and mostly we're going to talk about found footage horror movies, which I have watched a ton of in the past couple of years, and I've actually got a list of reviews on them that I'll talk about here in a minute. But my guest is no stranger to the show. It's Mark Pellegrini, who is in his Twitter profile says he's a horror bottomless pit, so it must be true. He's a comic book writer. He's a fiction writer. A man of many talents, a lot of fun, always fun to talk to. I think this is the first time you've ever been on the show, just you and me, Mark. Usually it's you and Tim or somebody else talking about comic books. But this time I've been wanting to just chat about horror movies for a long time, so we finally made it happen. So welcome back to the show.
Yeah, no, it's good to be chatting with you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it really has. So I know you've been busy. You've got Kamen America, the comic that you do with Timothy Lim, where you write it. He's the artist, and it's doing incredibly well. You guys are having a lot of success with Kamen America. And then, of course, you do Black Ops, which is the Animal Commandos kind of. If G.I.
Critter
Joe,
Commandos.
Yeah, Critter Commandos, which is a lot of fun. And has one of my favorite characters ever, Rigor Tortoise. But you've also got USAGI, the Rabbit Commando, and then you have a weasel?
Patriotter and Commando.
Patriotter, that's it, yeah. And then who was the other one?
Command Dog.
Command Dog. I don't think Command Dog was in the newest one, right?
Yeah, he was the latest one that was. He showed up for the first time in Volume 3, and he got a larger role in Volume 4.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about Rigor Tortoise I love. I like them all, though. I like how it has what would seem to be a Saturday morning cartoony vibe, but you guys play it straight. They're really on.
They're going for something that was a bit more like the Marvel G.I. Joe comic, more than the G.I. Joe cartoon. But we wanted it to look bright and fun like the cartoon. We've found a middle ground. Well,
it's a great series. Looking forward to more. I personally, I've loved Black Ops. I know you've had like buns. You always have a pun like Buns of the Patriots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I've loved Black Ops since day one. That's my favorite property that you and Tim do. But you're having huge success with Kamen America. So, give us a quick elevator pitch on what Kamen America is.
So Common America is about Carly Vanders. She's the girl next door who's got aspirations of being a fashionista, a fashion designer. She gets hit by a meteor instead, which the radiation from the meteor gives her various superpowers, which is convenient because she already lives in a world with a lot of different superheroes and vigilantes and folks like that out there. And so it's a cutthroat world of trying to get some attention as a hero or even as a fashionista, as anything. She finds herself being pulled in a bunch of different directions. Should she work for the government? Should she work for a talent agency? Should she follow her initial plans to be a fashionista? And along the way, she meets several other heroes who were hit by fragments of the same meteor. And we develop the story and mythology of the Kamen Corps, as they end up calling themselves. It's got so Tim's art style is done in a very manga anime aesthetic. It's a blend of the Japanese henshin heroes from the tokusatsu genre, and then, of course, American superheroes. And we're just having a lot of fun doing it. It's been gaining a lot of steam. We're on Volume 4 is up for pre-order right now. I believe there's still 8 days left on that. You can find it on Kickstarter. We also have the Common America Stars and Stripes Saga Omnibus, which collects volumes 1 through 4 in a nice hardback. That's the very first story arc. So for anybody who wants to be a new reader of Common America, that's what I recommend, is just pre-ordering that omnibus. And if you get it on Kickstarter, we plan to have it shipped before the end of the year.
And I know you're a big fan of that. I will not pronounce it right. Tokusatsu. How do you say that?
Tokusatsu. You got it right.
Yeah, tokusatsu kind of genre, that feel, that vibe of Japanese entertainment. Just see the stuff I see you share. So I imagine this is a really fun property for you to work on.
Oh, it is. And it's funny, too, because Tim, he watches more anime than I do, but he doesn't watch any tokusatsu stuff. So he doesn't watch Super Sentai or Kamen Rider or Ultraman or even Godzilla, like the Japanese Godzilla movies.
Which wounds me. That hurts me.
Yeah. But me, I watch some anime, but not nearly as much as Tim. But I've seen all those tokusatsu series that I just listed off. Yeah. I love that stuff. So together, we end up, our two interests end up blending really well, giving us pretty full coverage of what we're parroting and referencing.
Yeah, and I get a sense that, I mean, you're not trying to copy Sailor Moon, but you're kind of doing, like, Sailor Moon had all the other sailors, right? And everyone had kind of a unique...
Sailor Scouts. Well, so that's the funny thing is that Sailor Moon itself was a parody of Super Sentai. And then Sailor Moon was such a huge hit that it kind of ceased to be a parody and became its own genre.
Its own thing. It's huge. Yeah. I've never sat down and watched it, but everybody I know that's into anime, like the full catalog of anime, not just the recent years, loves Sailor Moon. So
it's a staple. It's like Dragon Ball Z. It's one that everybody's seen. Yeah.
And I like anime. I mean, I'm not an anime crazed fan, but I like anime. There's a lot of anime that I like, a lot of anime that I want to catch up on.
That's the nice thing is that anime is it covers so many different genres and age ratings and things like that. That there's a show, at least one show out there for anybody. It's like saying cartoons. There's a type of cartoon out there that appeals to anybody.
Right.
And same thing with anime. I mean, if for people who just aren't into just anime in general, they're gonna like Akira or Cowboy Bebop or things like that. There's something.
There is. I mean, anime is a medium, not a genre. So but yeah, it's really cool to see all of that. And this is super mainstream, but I've actually been surprised. Disney Plus just released the Star Wars Visions, which is a series of 9 shorts done by anime directors out of Japan based on Star Wars.
Yeah, Tim saw that and he told me it was very good. There's a couple of them that are done by the studio that we both really like called Trigger. They had a pair of shorts on there, and Trigger's great. I saw Promare in the theater a couple years ago when I was making the rounds in the U.S., and of course I like Little Witch Academia and Kill la Kill, so I've been meaning to check that out. I got to go and watch Star Wars.
They're really well done. I'm surprised. Every time I watch one, my son and I are working through them. I think we're on like 5 or 6. I'm like, how are these not making a bigger splash? Because one, they're Star Wars, but two, it's really excellent anime. And the first one is just a direct homage to samurai movies. Just really spectacular stuff.
It's kind of funny with Star Wars is that everything Star Wars lately has been pretty good, with the exception of the movies. The Mandalorian's been good. That last season of the Clone Wars that they did out, that was really good. People saying Visions was really good.
Visions is good. Bad Batch is good. And Bad Batch is basically just a continuation of Clone Wars, but it's focusing on one squad that was able to resist Order 66. But anyway, cool stuff. Want to move us on. I'm really bad about opening up tangents and then eating up.
No, we're here to talk about horror movies, right?
Yeah. I have a couple of questions for you too, though. But anyway, congratulations on your success with Kamen America and also Black Ops. And I know you're getting some stories in Kursova, advertising partner Kursova magazine, I should say.
You're advertising in Kursova. Nice.
Yeah, I advertise. We have an advertising agreement. I help promote them, and they run ads for me. And I love Alex, so I love what he's doing, keeping that torch alive for that, whether you want to call it Pulp Fiction.
I'm going to hang out with Alex next weekend. We're going to watch Oculus, which is a movie from like 10 years ago that I still haven't seen, so I'm actually looking forward to that one. I've been meaning to watch.
That's cool, man. Alex is a cool guy. And, Kursova, which, it's CIRSOVA, is doing very important work keeping the sort of Pulp Fiction / adventure fiction torch alive.
The Pulp Fiction style magazines that were, of course, all the rage back in like the 1920s, and then by the 70s they started going kaput. But he's one of the last OG doing it right pulp publishers.
Yeah, he's really doing it right. I was disappointed because he got the rights and ran that Bad Axe comic strip. I don't know if you read that or not. Sort of a sword and sorcery 70s gritty kind of. And he said that the response wasn't what he wanted it to be. So I was hoping he would do more of that stuff too. But I enjoy everything he does. Alex is doing important work. And I know you've had one. Have you had two? I know you've had at least one story.
So I've had one that's available right now. It's from the 2020 summer edition of Kursova. That's published my story, Just Don't Open the Door. I've got another one coming up in the winter 2021 edition. So that's going to be out in a couple months, or just a month from now. And that's my story, She Saw It Creeping Up the Stairs. And I actually just sold a third story to Alex that's going to be published, I believe, in, I think, the fall issue of 2022. So I got another one coming up next year.
That's great, man. I'm so happy for you on that, and also for the success that you and Tim are having. I felt like I kind of met you guys when y'all were beginning your arc together, kind of. And it's been really, really good to watch both of you begin achieving success, because you're both good guys, and I love the creativity and the stuff that you create. So, rigor tortoise forever. All right, moving on. So I got a couple of questions about you. We're going to be talking mainly today about found footage movies, which is a genre that I unironically love. A lot of people have a love-hate or just hate with it, but I love found footage movies, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I have a list of 118 found footage movies that I've watched with many reviews, and I'm adding to it. I just added VHS 94 to it within the past week.
Oh, that's the latest one, isn't it?
Yeah, it just dropped on Shudder. So I threw that review up. So I'm constantly adding to it. But I wanted to ask you a little bit. So you tweeted, I was not familiar with this movie. You tweeted over the weekend that you were watching Alone in the Dark, which was from November 1982. And what a cast. Donald Pleasant, Jack Palance, Martin Landau.
I know. It's weird how it's not considered like a classic. It's really it kind of goes under most people's radar. And I don't think I'd heard of it. When you say Alone in the Dark, I think of the video game. So that's me too. I think, or that terrible Yui Bowl movie based on the video game with
that they did in 2005 or 95 or something like that. Yeah, when I was trying to find Alone in the Dark from 1982, I got results on that. So what a cast, but also what grabbed my attention on it was that there's a scene where somebody's wearing a hockey mask.
Yeah, I know. When you look at art or the screenshots in the back of like the DVD and Blu-ray boxes, they always show that. It's like this knocking off a Jason kind of thing.
Right.
And the guy only wears the mask for like 5 seconds in the middle of the movie. It's just a really short scene, but it wound up being plastered over all
Of course, right.
Yeah, all the marketing because Jason and his hockey mask took off. So you got a killer with a hockey mask on. You make a big deal out of it.
Well, that was what I wanted to ask. So I looked and I was like, okay. Friday the 13th Part 3 dropped in August of 1982. And then the Alone in the Dark movie that we're talking about, not the U-Bowl movie, but the movie from 1982 dropped in November. So August, September, October, that's like 3 or 4 months. So
yeah, I think it's a total coincidence.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's just happenstance because it's a totally different style of hockey mask than the one that Jason wears. The one that the killer wears for that scene in the movie is like an actual hockey mask, like hockey players, like contemporary one. Whereas the one Jason wore was like an old-fashioned one, which is actually a custom one that only one person ever wore in the NHL in like the 1960s or 70s. I think it's just a total coincidence. Alone in the Dark, actually, it's a slasher movie, but it's more of a siege movie like Straw Dogs. Where these people are trapped in their house during a blackout, and a quartet of escaped lunatics from the local mental asylum, all made up of scary old people like Martin Landau and Jack Palance. They all like lay siege to the house and are trying to break in to kill everybody. It was very good. Great performances, obviously, because it has such a good cast, but it has some. It's a little slow. The first act takes a bit to get going, but it's carried by its cast.
So does Donald Pleasance at one point in the movie look out the window and then turn around to everybody and go, "Those eyes, I saw such darkness."
Donald Pleasance was hilarious in this movie because he's playing a psychiatric doctor. He's playing the same character basically as Loomis,
right?
But with a totally different personality. He's not duplicating the Loomis character. So this character is Loomis is like, so if Loomis was the serious one, this is like Loomis's black sheep half brother who's a hippie because he's like smoking pot throughout the movie. And he's got this really lax attitude where there's a part where Martin Landau, who's one of the lunatics, comes and taps him on the shoulder and asks him for matches. And Donald Pleasant's like, oh yeah, sure. And he hands him some matches. And then Martin Landau goes out and starts a fire. Like he's a terrible psychiatrist.
Right.
And he's actually really entertaining throughout the movie.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I love when I find out about these older movies that have been overlooked. An example recently within the past year or two, I had never heard of The Burning, and I watched it and I was like, that is amazing. How have I never heard of this movie? And in my opinion, The Burning is actually better. They're both like, Friday the 13th Part 1, is a camp movie where summer camp people getting killed. So is The Burning. In my opinion, The Burning is superior to Friday the 13th Part 1.
So I think I would agree with you, definitely. I mean, so that was the movie that Tom Savini made instead of Friday the 13th Part 2, because they originally wanted him back to do the effects for Part 2, but he decided to sign on for The Burning instead, which is essentially the same movie. It's a campground slasher movie, but he went and did that one, I think because he had more creative freedom on that.
Right.
I kind of think the hierarchy of campground slashers is... now this is just my personal taste. I really like Maniac. That's actually one that I kind of think is one of the best campground slashers.
I have not seen that one.
Yeah, it's really good. It gives you exactly what you want from a slasher movie. It doesn't have any pretenses about plots or character. It's just right from the get-go, murder. It's
right.
It's kind of like Burial Ground is one of the essential zombie movies where it just does not bother with trying to build up the characters or any.
It just unleashes the carnage. Yeah.
It's just a zombies right from the start. It's a movie that's so many horror movies never live up to their box cover because the box cover looks really cool. Then you start the movie and it's like an hour before anything happens. Movies like Maniac and Burial Ground, they just like get to it. They're like Spooky. Spooky is another one that just like gets right down to it. So I really like Maniac, even if it's more shallow than the other ones. The Burning is Yeah, it's definitely better than Friday the 13th Part 1, but I think Friday the 13th Part 2 is better than The Burning, or at least on the same level. But Part 2 is my favorite Friday the 13th flick.
Part 2 is great, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then there's, of course, Sleepaway Camp, which, if it weren't for that twist at the end, it probably would have been Memory Hold, like Cheerleader Camp. That's one nobody ever talks about.
I think that Sleepaway Camp is overrated. I mean, it's the twist ending is shocking.
It's what carries that movie. The movie itself is
average.
Pretty bland.
Yeah, it's average. Yeah, other than the scene where the cook gets.
With that ridiculous scene where he's got this gargantuan cauldron, like he's cooking in an oil drum or something, and then he falls into it, of course. But I think the best kill in Sleepaway Camp, the one that I remember besides that one, is the beehive kill, just because that was so gruesome. But there's probably 10 other deaths in that movie, and they're all just forgettable. But most of the deaths in Friday the 13th Part 1 are pretty, basic by today's standards, unremarkable.
Yeah, the thing with Friday the 13th Part 1 that the deaths that stick out with me are, of course, Kevin Bacon with the hand coming up when he's laying down and the arrow coming through his... and then, of course, at the end when Jason comes out of the water on the canoe, that's such an amazing moment. Yeah.
What's great about that is that if you go into the movie cold, you don't know that's going to happen. Who doesn't these days? But I actually did get to see it. We rented it on VHS when I was 11, and I did not know that ending was going to happen, and it scared the crap out of me.
Oh yeah, I watched it when I was 8 or something over at a friend's house, and the movie was so scary to us. We kept going outside and coming back in, and going outside and coming back in. But at 8 years old, with no filters or life experience, I saw that scene, and it traumatized the crap out of me.
It's just a jump scare, I know, and jump scares are so overdone in horror movies, especially today. But Friday the 13th Part 1 wasn't a jump scare horror movie. It's kind of like the ending of Carrie, that dream sequence where Carrie's hand pops out of the ground. Right. Carrie's not a jump scare horror movie. So when they do that at the end, it actually has impact. You're not, you don't get conditioned to it like these movies that are so jump scare heavy by the time you get to the end. It's like, what was that one? And it's just jump scare, jump scare, jump scare. Then at the very end, Bagul pops up and looks into the camera before the credits. And
which one was that?
So what? Sinister was the one with Ethan Hawke.
I haven't seen
Haunted House movie. It's pretty good. It's just I think that's Blumhouse is the producer, the production company, and they overdo the jump scares.
They're like the McDonald's of horror movies now. I mean, they really are.
Which is a shame because some of their stuff is pretty good. It's just that they overdo things like the jump scares that actually kind of bring down what would otherwise be a better horror movie.
Yeah, they make decent movies. They're just putting out a lot. So
yeah, they just churn it out.
Yeah. So anyway, all right, moving us on. We talked a little bit before we started recording. So I know that you have not seen Halloween Kills yet. I'm actually a big Halloween / Michael Myers fan, and I also love Halloween 3: Season of the Witch very much, even though it has nothing to do with Michael Myers. So I love the Halloween franchise. I like some of it better than others, obviously. I can appreciate what Rob Zombie did on a certain level, although that's not my preferred stuff. And then the Halloween from a few years ago was okay. I didn't hate it. There were some scenes in it I really liked. But so I got Peacock. I did the Peacock thing, right? You could pay $6, get a month of Peacock, and Halloween Kills is on Peacock right now. So you could basically pay $6 to watch Halloween Kills from home and get a month of Peacock. So that's what I did. And it was pretty good. It was not scary. I can't remember the last time that I thought a Halloween movie was scary.
Well, I mean, most slashers, I don't think slasher films are scary. I mean, other than that jump scare.
Yeah, there'll be a jump scare, which half the time is a dang cat. They always jump a cat.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
But slasher movies in general, they're not scary. They're cool. You go to see a slasher flick because you want to see the innovative and creative ways the killer murders people, and it's usually really interesting. And that's kind of where the 2018 Halloween kind of disappointed me. And I understand why they did it the way they did it. Is because the the Halloween franchise had been getting so crazy and weird since the 90s that they had to dial it back and do
it
back
went
to
off the
basics.
rails. Dude,
Yeah,
it went way off the rails.
When Michael Myers gets into a karate fight with Busta Rhymes, in Halloween Resurrection, it's like and funny, Halloween Resurrection is the quasi found footage Halloween movie.
Yeah, because they got the cameras in the house,
the web series thing. But yeah, they try to do like this is a traditional Halloween movie, and like, okay, that's cool. I'm glad that I understand why you did it, but it's also kind of bland,
Yeah.
The kills are unremarkable. Yeah.
Yeah, my problem with Halloween. Well, I have multiple problems with Halloween Resurrection, but a lot of people like that scene where at the end Busta Rhymes or whatever karate kicks him and all this stuff. So here's the thing. I'm like, okay, it's a neat scene and it's a fun scene, but it's out of place in a slasher movie where Michael Myers is supposed to be the unstoppable evil. Right? Busta Rhymes is not supposed to be cool and drop kicking him, because then you completely take away fearsomeness from Michael Myers. And so that's what I don't like about that scene. But if it was in another movie, I'd be like, all right, that's fine. It's kind of a funny scene. But, once you make in what was a horror movie, it wasn't a comedy, it was a horror movie. Once you make the slasher or the monster, whatever, the butt of a joke, that you're completely disrespecting the kind of movie you're trying to make.
Yeah, and Halloween Resurrection, and he has that scene where Busta Rhymes is dressed up as Michael Myers.
Yeah, and they just look at each other.
Michael Myers.
Yeah.
And he starts like talking trash to Michael, and then turns around and walks away, and Michael doesn't do anything. And remember the whole theater laughing, and they're laughing at Michael Myers. They turned him into a joke. And once you do that, once you do a Halloween Resurrection, the only direction to go after that was to reboot it, and they gave it to Rob Zombie. And he did a lot of weird, crazy stuff with his two movies. I'm not going to say I liked it, especially a lot of the stuff with Part 2, but, at least he was innovating. They definitely feel like zombie movies. So
my problem and I'll watch him, I'm like, okay, he's trying to do something here. My problem is when you give context and history to why Michael Myers does stuff, he becomes less scary. Because that's
the thing too.
Right. What's scary about Michael Myers, he was just a regular suburban kid that ended up being just totally evil inside for no reason.
So they tried doing that before, with Part 2, they brought in the idea that Laurie's his sister, and so he went after Laurie because he's trying to kill his sister like he did a long time ago. And like, okay, now you gave him a motivation. When in the first movie, his only motivation for going after Laurie was she went up and dropped the keys off in front of his house. And so that's when he saw her, and that's when he decided he was going to kill her. Right. It's completely random. And it makes it feel like, anybody, you could be the victim of Michael Myers. It's just totally random. Whereas they making it that he's out to kill his sister and his family and stuff is like, okay, well, I'm safe because I'm not related to Michael Myers. It takes that away. And then like by Part 6, they brought in the Cult of Thorn.
That whole crap. I watch it out of diligence to the franchise, but just stupid.
Yeah, every time they try to explain a reason for why Michael does what he does, it never works because he's not supposed to have a reason. And so the 2018 movie, like just doing away with all the sequels, including Part 2, Laurie and Michael aren't related. Michael's just Michael the way he was as God intended, as John Carpenter intended from the original movie. Like that's good. I would say that 2018 Halloween wasn't great, but at least it was decent. It was a back to basics movie. I do want to see Halloween Kills. Everyone's saying that it's a lot better than the 2018 one, so I'll get around to it.
So, without going into spoilers, I'll try to say that they get more into shifting away from Michael versus Laurie. They go even more in that direction, where it's not about necessarily tracking down Laurie. And there's also, they put in this element of like Haddonfield is really tired of him. And I'll just say if Haddonfield had a fortune cookie for this movie, it would be if you go looking for trouble, you will find it. But it does have, you hear about like part of the marketing, like a ridiculously high body count. Totally true. And it reinforces that like, Michael will brutally kill you. Like, he will, like, brutalize you while he's killing you. He doesn't just, well, sometimes he'll just stab you and keep going. But a lot of times, like, Jason will just kill you and keep going. Like, Michael will take his time and brutalize people, which it's just, you're like, ow, ooh, ow. So I thought it was fun. It's, it was a fun horror movie, and it didn't change my life or anything like that, but I think it's worth watching, especially if you like Halloween and Michael Myers. So, and I'll just leave it at that. But you can only tell so many stories, right? I mean, as much as I love like Jason and Freddy and Michael Myers, you can only tell so many stories.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about slashers is that it's very easy to relocate a slasher. And while it is simple, it's one of those things that's so simple that you could probably tell 100, movies worth of Jason stories. It's just there's a difference between I don't know, Jason goes and kills a bunch of people on a boat, like in Part 8. Or Jason goes into outer space and becomes a cyborg. There's a point where you take it too far. Yeah.
I love freaking Jason X. I don't love it as a Friday the 13th movie, but I love it as a sci-fi horror movie. It's got a lot of fun moments in it.
I used to hate Jason X. In fact, I remember even seeing it in the theater just because I wanted to see a Friday the 13th movie in the theater. But I remember hating it. But then eventually there was a point where it was like I finally got the joke, and that's that the movie is a joke. It's like if you don't see it as part of the franchise timeline, like it's just a self-parody of the Friday the 13th franchise, kind of like there's the Hammer Frankenstein.
When they put him in the hologram. Holodeck, and they're like, we're doing a sex and wanting to have sex, right?
Yeah, right. The movie is just a goofy parody of itself, and then it's really funny and entertaining. I don't view it as canon. It's kind of like Hammer has their Frankenstein series, and there's one installment in the Frankenstein series that's non-canon. It's Horror of Frankenstein. It doesn't even have Peter Cushing in it, and it's a self-parody of their own series. And if you watch it that way as just a parody of itself, it's actually a pretty good Hammer Frankenstein movie. It's a comedy, but it's funny. Same thing with Jason X. It's just a parody of the Friday the 13th series within the Friday the 13th series, and it's just funny.
Right. I hear you. Well, getting back, talking about there's only so many stories you can tell. I mean, you can make an infinite amount of movies that, like you were talking about earlier, like movies that just get right into it. Don't worry about character. Just get to the good stuff. You can make those over and over and over with Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers. Well, I guess what I'm referring to is when they keep trying to add to the mythology and keep trying to put it, sooner or later it collapses under the weight of itself. It's like
that's when you get to something like Jason Goes to Hell, where it turns out that Jason was cursed and he's actually a demon who can whose heart can turn into a little monster and possess people.
Which is my least favorite of the series, but
it is. It's I like that. It's one of the goriest in the entire series because it came out in the 90s when the MPAA was lightening up on their gore censorship. But it's exactly it's like the Curse of Thorn thing from Halloween 6. It's like that's just you added a little bit too much as you over seasoned it.
Yeah. I mean, it works best in my opinion when he's the very definition of evil for no discernible reason, because then the kid next door could do that to you. Or, a family member could just suddenly be evil and take you out. That's much scarier to me than knowing the motivations. So, do you have a favorite horror movie franchise? Speaking of franchise.
Let's see, franchise.
You like the Puppet Master stuff, don't you?
Oh, man. I love the first 5 Puppet Master movies, and that's where I do a hard stop on that series, and they've made I think they're on Puppet Master 14 or 15 by now, and they're all awful. When Full Moon, you can watch those Full Moon films from the 90s, and you can tell exactly when they ran out of money, because those movies go from entertaining and watchable to just absolute garbage, and everything's filmed in Romania, and it shows, and you can always tell what number in the series. Puppet Master 5 is where you stop, because from Curse of Puppet Master on, they're just awful.
From that point on, they're Corman movies.
Yeah. They're sub-Corman. They're pretty bad. Like Subspecies 3, when they can still afford to do stop motion And then when they can't do stop motion, that's when they've run out of money. And what was the other one that was so bad? When they started doing stuff like Ginger Deadman and Evil Bong and Doll Graveyard,
that stuff.
bad. Yeah.
So would you say that's your favorite franchise, or do you have
no. When it comes to a franchise, I think Friday the 13th might actually be my favorite franchise. There's certainly a lot to it, and it's been, for someone who loves Friday the 13th movies as much as I do, this we're going on 12 years now. This 12-year drought of Friday the 13th movies has been pretty brutal, and it's all because of that lawsuit between the original screenwriter and
Did you try out the video game? I heard good things about the video game.
I did. The video game was a lot of fun, and then they had to stop updating it because of the lawsuit. I've been collecting. So NECA has been putting out in their Ultimate series these Jason toys that are fantastically sculpted, and they've been doing one Jason from each movie because Jason looks different in each movie. They've been great.
Right.
Yeah, and they had to put it on hold. I think they finally just got the green light to continue, but it's been on hold for 2 or 3 years. There's just been nothing for all these years because of that lawsuit that would not end. And it's been resolved. The problem right now, though, is that the lawsuit's been resolved, so they're free to go about making new Friday the 13th movies again. But part of the agreement was that the two parties have to work together to make something with Friday the 13th. So
it's going to have
how long is that going to take?
It's going to have a weird vision. Yeah.
It's not so much that. It's more that you have basically two captains now. And so how long is it going to take for them to put out a movie when the two people who've been going at it in court for 12 years now, to get them to work together? We could be waiting another 12 years.
We'll lock those two guys and Kane Hodder in a room and let Kane negotiate between them. They'll do aggressive negotiations. So to get something worked out. Well, I Friday the 13th is not my favorite franchise, but I like it a lot. But I prefer the pre-zombie Jason stuff. I thought, after he became a zombie and all that was not as interesting to me, but I do like Friday the 13th. And I watched the remake. It was okay.
The remake had the Marcus Nispel movie from 2009. It had the same thing as the 2018 Halloween, where they brought Jason back to basics because they had to. He just turned into a demon. He turned into a robot. He fought Freddy. They had gotten really, really goofy with Jason for the past several movies. So this one was, like a bare bones Jason movie, and that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like a bare bones Jason movie, and it was like, okay, it's just it's
even putting back in the burlap.
In the burlap sack. I mean, I think when I was watching the movies, this is okay, but it could be better. It's all the kills in that movie were really forgettable. I was like, if they just went a little crazy. I know they're specifically trying not to go crazy with Jason because the last few movies were nuts, but if they just went a little nuts, movie, it would have been better. Yeah, I
hear you. Well, anyway, we'll see what the future holds. And as much as I love Michael Myers, I was like, Jason would probably take him, but after, especially zombie Jason, right? But because for the most of the timeline, Michael Myers has just been a mortal dude, but he's just crazy and evil and, can push through a lot of crap. But now I got to say, after Halloween Kills, I don't know. It would be interesting to see what happens. Okay, one last thing. Yeah, I'm tanging with this like crazy, but I'm trying to get some good stuff out of you while I got you. So there's kind of a new trend where they're taking horror movies and now they're making TV shows out of them.
Yeah.
Right. So I haven't seen it, but I know MTV did it with Scream. I think it was MTV that did Scream.
Yeah, it was MTV. They did 3 seasons of that, and I haven't seen any of them.
I haven't seen it, but now Sci-Fi is doing 2 of them. They're doing Day of the Dead, and they're doing Chucky. Now, I watched the first episodes of both, and I thought the Chucky one was actually better, even though I'm more of a zombie fan. But what do you think of that idea? What do you think of taking...
I mean, There's good and there's bad. I really liked the Starz series Ash versus Evil Dead.
Right.
I thought that was a fantastic continuation of the Evil Dead trilogy. I know that there were some legal issues because Army of Darkness is owned by a separate studio from the Evil Dead films. So the Army of Darkness movie happened. They just couldn't directly reference it. But I thought they did a good job getting around that. Bruce Campbell, of course, was great. There's a lull in season 2, but it really picks up in season 3, and it has a really satisfying ending. So I thought they did a great job on that. As a continuation via TV series, that was fantastic. I've been meaning to check out Creepshow. Everyone's told me it's actually a pretty good return to form.
I saw the first season on Shudder. I think it's up to season 3 now. I thought the first season was fine. And I remember watching the first Creepshow when it came out on HBO and loving it. So and I've seen Creepshow 2 and all that, but I would say I'm a Creepshow fan. I've seen it. I couldn't tell you how many times. And I thought the TV show on Shudder was pretty good.
Yeah, and that's what everyone's saying is that. So anthology horror is it hasn't gone away. It's just it's changed formats. Now, instead of TV shows where every episode is a new story, it's every season is a new story.
Right, that's like American Horror Story, right.
Yeah, and Channel Zero, where the idea of the season-long story arc, and then everything changes in season 2. And that's I like some of that, but there's also so much filler. Like, even Channel Zero, which is 6-episode seasons, like, seasons 3 and 4 are always slow.
Is Channel Zero the one that has, like, the dude made out of teeth?
Yeah, in season 1.
That image creeps me out, man.
Oh, it's a great effect. That's the thing too, is that the stories for each season in Channel Zero are good. It's just like episode 3 and 4 of each season you could probably skip because nothing happens. It's really boring, and you can tell that it's just filler. The second act in each season is always just turning the wheels, just keeping it moving. But for Chucky, I'm gonna check it out when the entire season comes out, and I'll probably pick it up on Blu-ray or something. So I'm kind of waiting on that.
I was pretty impressed. It's a direct. It's not a reboot. It's a continuation of.
It picks up where Cult of Chucky left off, right?
I don't know. I've only seen like the first 2 Chucky movies, probably.
Oh well, the first 2 are the best, but the last 2 that came out, Curse of Chucky and Cult of Chucky, they were pretty good. They were trying to get back to what the Child's Play series had been when it started, because Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky turned it into a comedy series, right? And especially Seed of Chucky just like got really. Yeah,
this is not comedy. There's some dark comedy because Chucky's a jerk, but it's not comedy. It's straight up like Chucky's,
and that's what Curse and Cult felt like. Is that. Because the Child's Play series has always had a little bit of humor. Even in the first couple movies, there's a little bit of humor in them. But Bride and Seed just went, off the rails. But Curse and Cult brought it back to form. So I have good feeling about the Child's Play TV series. I do mean to check it out. Now, as for Day of the Dead, that's one of those things where I'm just ignoring it because the studio that owns the rights to the name Day of the Dead, the franchise rights, they have nothing to do with George Romero. They've made some terrible reboot Day of the Dead, like Day of the Dead Contagion.
Yeah, that's the same studio that's doing the TV show?
Yeah.
Those movies are not good.
Because they're awful, but they own the rights to Day of the Dead, so they're just exploiting them and just making garbage and slapping the name Day of the Dead on it because that's what they have the rights to. And so I just ignore anything they do.
Well, to be fair, I would say I watched 1 episode. Okay. And it was better than their movies. I didn't realize it was the same people because their movies are terrible.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I guess it all comes down to who's steering the ship. So if somebody does actually care about the Romero franchise, maybe they'll do a good job.
That was the question I have. Was what makes it Romero? And I'll tell you what I think is what makes it Romero. But, I'm curious about your answer too. But they talk a lot about this TV series. They're trying to be in the spirit of Romero, which the movies they've made, like Day of the Dead and Day of the Dead Contagion, were not Romero at all.
No, nothing to do with them. Yeah.
Right. But this is like Romero to be a Romero zombie movie, there's two different things that have to happen. One, you have to follow Romero's rules of zombies, right? Which is what most people think, but they're not fast.
Shoot him in the head, kind of thing.
I think they broke that rule. Now that I think about it, because there was one that like gets half of its head sheared off, and it's still like staggering around. But there's it's Romero type zombies so far in the TV show, but Romero always uses zombies as a vehicle for social commentary every time.
Yeah, no, and it's one of those things where now it's so cliche, but it's because he started the cliche, where it's like the real monster is humanity, and like, oh, clap, 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 but that's Romero's the one who started that, and it's everybody else's fault for knocking him off. I don't blame Romero for that.
He's always trying to make a point,
I think it's the better execution is that humanity's worst enemy is itself, not necessarily the zombies. Right. And it's not just in his Dead trilogy. It's actually, I think he made 5 of them, but I don't really count Land or Diary. I didn't enjoy those. But the first
I like Diary. I did not like Land. Whichever one they're on the island with the feuding families, I can't stand that one.
Oh, yeah. guy. Well, I think that he may have even done a 6th one, but no. With his movies though, it's always that humanity can't get out of its own way or just can't cooperate, and you can do a movie with that thematically and it not be boring or heavy-handed. It really just comes down to the execution. I mean, there's another Romero movie it's not a zombie movie technically, but it is an outbreak movie. It's called The Crazies.
Yeah, The Crazies.
He did that he did that after Night of the Living Dead, but before he did Dawn of the Dead. So it's kind of a nice bridge in between them, and it's the same thing. It's there's an outbreak that's causing everybody to turn into violent madmen who just attack and kill each other, and the government scientists are trying to figure out a vaccine or whatever, a cure to stop them, but they keep getting in their own way, and then they accidentally kill the scientists at the end.
Yeah, the government takes it on the chin in that one for sure.
So it's basically of the same lineage as the zombie movies. It's just sub out zombies with crazies, and you get it. So that is a theme in all of his movies. But unfortunately, it's also a theme in every other zombie movie made by anybody else ever. He just gets so tired of it. It's like Walking Dead. Good Lord, I'm so sick of Walking Dead.
Yeah, Romero didn't like Walking Dead because he's like, it's just a soap opera. So, but if on the off chance people don't know what we're talking about, like Dawn of the Dead, it was about like the lack of real life with consumer culture because they're holed up in a mall, and it was showing how shallow consumer culture was, and so was it Land of the Dead where Dennis Hopper and the big skyscraper? Was that Land of the Dead? Yeah, they were basically talking about the 99% and the 1%.
Yeah, they're talking about like social classes. Honestly, I think and Day of the Dead's interesting because it's the military versus scientists, but you also find out that the scientist in the movie, they call him Dr. Frankenstein, wasn't doing anything useful at all. He was
just playing.
He was just playing around. He was dicking around in that movie. And so you kind of figure that the lesson there is that they're both jerks and they all deserve to die. But I honestly think that the message is handled at its best in Night of the Living Dead because there's no grander, scheme of things, no bigger umbrella message. It's just two groups of people trying to share a house to survive, and they can't get along. And at the end of the movie, what do you find out? The jackass character was right the whole time, but no one would listen to him because he was a jackass.
He survived, yeah.
Well, he survived
until he gets shot.
Yeah, well, that's in the remake. In the original Night of the Living Dead, what's his name? The hero.
Ben shoots him, doesn't he? In the first one.
In the first one, what happens is he, I think his name's Dwayne. He locks himself in the basement, which he had been resisting doing.
His daughter, right?
He locks himself in the basement. And the daughter's down there. He kills the daughter, though, that turned into a zombie, and he survives. He survives the whole movie. If they'd all just locked themselves in the basement, like the one jackass guy had said from the beginning, they'd have all survived. But because that guy was an asshole and no one wanted to listen to him, they all died. But he survives. He makes it out, and then he gets shot by one of the
the
gangs of
deputies
people.
or whatever.
The deputies outside who mistakes him for a zombie.
So you're talking about Ben.
Yeah, Ben, that's his name. God, it was killing me.
Because he ends up taking refuge where he said we shouldn't go down there, but that's where
exactly, and that's
yeah.
What makes that movie so interesting is that it turns out that the asshole character that everybody hates throughout the whole movie was right the whole time. Yeah. But the moral here is that if you want people to listen to you, don't be a jerk.
Right, don't be a jerk.
You can interpret it that way. But it's all done best in the very first Romero zombie movie, and that's kind of like every other zombie movie, even the ones Romero's made since then, they just don't do that message as well as the first time.
Right. Well, yeah, because they just let it. They didn't hit you over the head with it. So, and a lot of people think that Romero was making a social commentary about Ben being black. But I mean, he over and over, he's like, no, that was never part of the original. It just
I feel like if that was the message, they would have outright said it in the movie, and they never do.
Right. Yeah. It just happened that the actor that they chose but that's not what the movie was supposed to be about. But a lot of people take that away from the movie because he gets shot by the cops at the end. So,
yeah.
But anyway, all right, moving on. I'll just say that the series, I could see where they're trying to do like a Romero type social commentary instead of just having what is it, DayZ or whatever that other series is, just crazy zombie action. Because you've got the town is divided by a mayoral race where all your conservatives are on one side and your liberals are on the other. So they're, you can see they're trying to do that to kind of get into that commentary. the conservative mayor is trying to get reelected, but when the zombies break out, she pulls it because she open carries, so she's blowing everybody away. The zombies, she's like, "How does that Second Amendment taste, Mother Blanker?" So anyway, all right, moving on. So I recently posted a list of movies I've been watching over the past couple of years. So I just started binging on found footage movies a while back. And I started watching so much of them, I was like, I should do some like little mini reviews here. So I'll put in the show notes, the show notes for the shows at shaneplays.com. You can go there, it'll be linked there. Or you could just go to shaneplays.com and search for found footage, and you'll find this post. But it currently has 118 entries on found footage movies that I have watched, and they have short little sort of paragraph-length reviews on them. I love found footage. When it's done right, it can put you into the movie in a way that other movies can't, because it's not perfectly shot. It's just like you're seeing it from the perspective of if it was happening to you. POV.
I mean, I think people have kind of gotten over their instinctive hate of found footage. It was I know, like it was almost like a bad word, like 10 years ago, because everybody was doing found footage flicks. And it was almost like back in the 80s, people were sick and tired of slashers. Now everybody loves slashers. Slashers are retro. We enjoy it. I think it's the same thing with found footage, that we're kind of, because we're not in that glut of nothing but found footage anymore, that we can go back and we can pick and choose, the wheat from the chaff, and we can say, hey, these movies are actually pretty good.
Well, I think one of the reasons we got a glut of found footage movies was because the barrier to entry is pretty low.
Oh, all you need is a camcorder to make one of those movies. Yeah.
Bad camera work is almost part of what you need
makes
to do.
It more authentic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, but if it's done well, it can be extremely unsettling and really mess with you, like I said, in a way that other movies can't. Because
where it gets good is when someone does something creative with the concept, and then everybody else knocks it off and devalues what the first person did, the innovator. But it doesn't change the fact that, they had a good idea and they were the first ones to do it. You get something like VHS, an anthology horror film that's based around finding a bunch of crazy stuff on videotapes and then watching a whole bunch of them, like that was really cool. VHS 1 and 2 are great. VHS 3 was done by different people and it wasn't so good. But or something like
I need to revisit VHS Viral because I put it in the same category with VHS and VHS 2, but I see so many people knocking on it. I need to rewatch Viral.
It really let me down. It had fewer stories. The stories weren't as good, and it lacked that because it wasn't made by the creators. So it was like Creepshow 3, which was not made by Romero, Stephen King, or Tom Savini. That was just the rights holders who owned the IP Creepshow. They just made a terrible movie and slapped the name Creepshow on it. That's what VHS Viral kind of felt like. It was just like, hey, we own the rights to VHS. Let's just crap out a VHS sequel, even if the people who created the series aren't involved. And that's exactly what it felt like. But 1 and 2 are great. Or you do something like Cloverfield. Hey, it's a giant monster movie, but it's also a found footage movie. Mm-hmm. And then the first Cloverfield, anyway, was a really enjoyable movie. It was an innovative take on found footage. And then there's stuff like that are like hybrid movies, like The Rise of Leslie Under the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which is like it's a faux documentary, which is a type of found footage, I guess. It kind of those two genres.
I'd include it because it still gives you that same realistic feel.
That shot on video kind of thing. Yeah. And that one was a hybrid movie where it would be like a documentary, and then it would switch to being like an actual 80s slasher movie, and then it would switch back to the documentary. Like that stuff was really cool, doing those sorts of ideas where you don't just do a found footage movie. Like there's a million takes on the Blair Witch Project. Everyone wants to do a Blair Witch Project, but there are people who are like, hey, let's do something a little crazier with the idea instead. And those are usually end up being the best.
Well, that's one of the reasons that VHS, the series, and it's literally V/H/S, is the name of the series. The reason it's so good is not only is it an anthology of found footage movies, which are some of my favorites. There's several anthology found footage movies out there. I think that found footage in some ways almost lends itself to a shorter form. But it's also almost every segment in the VHS series is an experimental, like a director being experimental with found footage and being risky and bold. And there's some great stuff in there. Speaking of Cloverfield, that made my essential category. And I said that's basically Godzilla as found footage through the lens of J.J. Abrams. Anyway, it's about 9/11 and New York City, and it's a monster movie, and Cloverfield's a wonderful movie. I mean, the first one is amazing. But yeah, I took these movies and I categorized them into, and as you probably noticed, in my reviews, I'm generous because I think a lot of other people would stick more of these movies in bad and kind of bad than I did. The majority of my movies fall into average because I'm looking at it through the lens of found footage, and I don't know, my love of found footage. So most of my reviews fell into average, but it goes essential, great, good, average, kind of bad, and outright bad. And in my world, it's really got to be a stinker to make bad, because there's not a whole lot in the kind of bad and bad categories. So I'm sure a lot of people will look at this list and go, "What? How is he rating stuff that way?" But remember, these are my opinions. It's subjective, and it's just how I ranked them. But talking about, let's go back to Blair Witch, because there were found footage movies before that.
Yeah, Blair Witch is the one that really kicked it off and kind of it cemented what we think of as a found footage movie. Even if like Cannibal Holocaust came out in the 70s, but that's not what the movie people think of when they think found footage. They immediately think Blair Witch.
Blair Witch, because it established not only did it establish sort of the style of horror movie that found footage usually is, but it also established a lot of the tropes. It
created a template, for better or worse. It defined a formula.
Right, exactly. It established sort of a formula. Not the least of which is in almost every found footage movie, nobody survives.
I mean, that's kind of the point, is that someone has to find the footage. Like, oh, hey, look what I found. I wonder what's on this videotape. And then you find out everybody died.
Right, exactly. You're like, oh, that's very depressing and morbid. But anyway, so Blair Witch came along. I remember going to see Blair Witch in the theater, and it was pretty creepy in the theater. Never seen anything like it. It's a big phenomenon. And the marketing campaign at the time literally had people convinced that this was
you had
real
to
found footage.
Yeah, it was one of those like you had to be there kind of moments to understand. And the film seems so kind of like quaint now, but like if you were there in 1998 when everybody was talking about that movie and it was all over the place, and Sci-Fi Channel ran a documentary about the Blair Witch, pretending like the Blair Witch mythology was real and that the whole thing was real, and you watched that documentary, even if you knew that it was all just a marketing campaign, it really sucked you in. It was almost one of those what are they called? ARGs, alternate reality games, or what they're called now. But it was like a multimedia experience. I mean, that transcended just going to see a movie. You're renting Blair Witch on tape. Yeah, now it's just one of a million horror movies you could watch on Shudder. But at the time, it was like an experience.
It was an experience. Everybody was talking about it. I worked with a guy. I distinctly remember. I worked with a guy who thought the marketing story was real, that they had really found the tapes or the footage, and there was the actors, the actress, and the actors and all that. I remember for a while they're like, "No, we're still alive. Hire us. We're actors."
Well, it's funny because when people like read about the Orson Welles War of the Worlds broadcast, I'm like, how could anybody be so stupid as to think that aliens were real just because of that radio broadcast? And like, well, were you there in '98 when Blair Witch was out? Because I knew a few kids in my high school at the time who also thought that it was real. I mean, there are gullible people who fall for that stuff.
No doubt. Yeah, this guy was convinced it was real. And I remember like there were 3 or 4 of us trying to explain it wasn't real. And I mean, he really thought it was real. But anyway, so I went and saw it. Pretty creepy in the theater. Never seen anything like it. But what really got me was it was me and a buddy, my roommate. We're both in the Air Force at the time, and we went to Hastings after the movie. And there was like a Blair Witch comic book or magazine or something. And I was reading through it, and it had all this amazing backstory about the witch and Coffin Rock and all this stuff. And it made it seem even more real. And I went home that night, and my buddy was in the Air Force. It was a night shift. I was at home by myself, and I was genuinely creeped out. I mean, that got under my skin. I
honestly think that faux documentary, I watched that more than I watched the actual Blair Witch Project movie. I like that documentary better than the movie.
Right. Yeah, the one that it was like a marketing thing that came out.
Yeah, it's always they always include it on like the DVDs as a bonus feature because it was a documentary that ran on the Sci-Fi Channel, but it's the one that goes, like you said, through the fake history of the Blair Witch with all these like fake paintings that are supposed to look like, period drawings and portraits.
They did a good job
Blair Witch. Yeah, they did a great job on it, and I actually prefer watching that than watching. Oh,
how funny! Yeah, they did a great job on it, but I watched it again within the past year or two, and it did nothing because I've seen so many movies like it, and I knew it was going to happen. So it did nothing. I hate to say it, like the big granddaddy that broke so much ground. I was like, I didn't dislike it, but I was kind of like, meh. It just, it didn't. And then I watched the remake. They did it was kind of a sequel, where the filmmaker, the girl, the famous, shooting up the nose.
That's the thing about Blair Witch is that, I mean, even the first sequel they did, Book of Shadows, that was awful. Yeah. I know it's got like a cult status. Some people love it.
I went to the theater to saw that, and I was very disappointed with it. I was like, what is this?
And it's Blair Witch is fine as just, it's a good done in one. It's its own thing. Just watch the original, maybe watch that documentary, or the only good spin-off of the Blair Witch is the Scooby-Doo project. Like that one's aces. I love the Scooby-Doo project. They nailed that one. It's the best parody. And you can watch a short film version of it. It's been compiled on YouTube, but yeah, that's kind of the only Blair Witch thing. Now there was something that actually, its only claim to fame is that it's exactly like the Blair Witch Project, and it came out like a year earlier, but nobody noticed it.
Oh, the last broadcast.
The last broadcast,
Yeah.
and I've seen the last broadcast, and my attitude is like, yeah, I can understand why nobody noticed this movie, but noticed the Blair Witch Project instead, because the Blair Witch Project is the same thing but better.
Yeah,
that's all I can really say about it. Yeah.
The interesting thing to me about the last broadcast, because the more I researched found footage movies, I was like, oh, this is a bigger rabbit hole than I thought. And so I watched the last broadcast kind of out of due diligence. And, I went back and I watched Cannibal Holocaust and all that, which I have to recommend. Cannibal Holocaust is a tremendously powerful horror movie. And it's got a very strong found footage component in it as well.
It's great. It's just a very unpleasant film to watch, not because it's bad,
unpleasant.
just because it makes you feel unpleasant.
Oh yeah, it's an unpleasant movie. There was evidently, like when I was reading up on it, for a short time, again, people thought it was real. The director was brought up on murder charges. For a short time.
He had to prove that they were alive.
Yeah,
he was brought up on an obscenity charges, I think, in like the UK. And so basically, if he ever went to the UK, he'd have been arrested.
Yeah,
that movie upset a lot of people,
especially for the time, because it was 1980, and it's got a more standard movie wrapped around a found footage component.
Segments.
Yeah, and it's. And there's like some people get upset because they really kill animals in the movie. Like they shot a pig.
That's the part so they kill animals in the movie, and they also they do use some stock footage of like military executions, and those obviously that's real footage of people getting killed, but it's done via stock footage. So there is a lot of
that. Yeah, that's crazy.
So there is a lot of reality in that movie. It's kind of like watching Faces of Death. Faces of Death, like I'd say 75% of the footage in Faces of Death is fake, but there is a 25% actual footage of dead people, and of course all the slaughterhouse footage of actual animals getting killed, and all of that is just relentlessly unpleasant to watch. But that 25% of real footage lends a reality to the 75% of fake footage, and so it blends, and so it gets to the point where you can't always tell which is fake and which is real. The Faces of Death films, though, they're I guess they're found footage. You could call them that.
They're reality TV.
They kind of fall into a crack in there, and they're pure exploitation. There's a lot of, so Faces of Death was mostly fake. But what Faces of Death did was it kicked off a genre of videotapes in the 80s that weren't fake. It kind of accidentally started a trend of people making films and selling them that are basically like snuff almost.
Films, basically,
they would find footage of dead people and people dying and animals dying.
It's like they weren't killing people on tape, but they were finding
but they were finding like the news footage and stuff like that. And so Faces of Death ended up creating that sort of like pseudo snuff genre. The demand for that stuff. I don't know how we got off on this tangent.
We were talking about Cannibal Holocaust had some real footage.
We're talking about Cannibal Holocaust,
which is worth checking out. If somebody considers themselves a horror movie fan, I recommend Cannibal Holocaust.
I mean, it's just a good movie in general. So
it's not, but as you pointed out, it's not inspiring. It's pretty hard to watch. So it's very hard to watch, but they have evidently some footage of people really getting shot. I didn't realize, or killed. I didn't realize
the turtle getting turtle that gets killed is real. And that's oh god. You don't like to watch that part, but the rest of the movie is just a pretty good people getting eaten by cannibals movie.
Right, and deserving it. I guess that's a spoiler, but anyway. All right. So I'm just kind of looking through my essential list. Blair Witch Project I put in there as a place of honor. Cannibal Holocaust, Cloverfield. Now, Grave Encounters. This one is interesting because it's not as good as the other movies in the essential list, but it's what I consider a best-in-class example of a type of found footage movie that you encounter a lot, which is the ghost hunters investigating the hospital or asylum or whatever. That recurs over and over and over. And because I guess finding an empty building and walking around with a camera,
yeah, right.
is a relatively cheap.
It's one of those. Yeah, it's really cheap. Now, Grave Encounters, it's disappeared into the memory hole in my brain of all the movies that are just like it. So it didn't leave a big impression on me. But and the entire Ghost Bros TV genre of reality television,
which I don't watch. Yeah, I don't watch any of that.
Where it's a bunch of guys with a camcorder go into a basement and start yelling at ghosts, like, "Hey, come at me, bro! Hey, come on, I'm here, bro! Come fight me, bro!" Like you're just yelling at ghosts. What? This is stupid. It kind of falls into that. It's all I can think about whenever I see like a movie like Grave Encounters. But I think the Ghost Hunter found footage works best when it's a faux documentary. Like there's one that the BBC did back in the 80s called Ghost Watch, which I really recommend.
I want to see this so bad. I can't find it. I hear nothing but good stuff about it.
Oh, it's really good. It kind of gets a little silly at the end, but as a faux documentary, found footage kind of thing, it's very good. Now I'm saving it for Halloween. That's going to be my Halloween viewing. But the WNUF Halloween special
is fantastic.
Is from what I've read of the summary, it's a similar kind of thing as Ghost Watch. And I can't wait to watch that one. I've been saving it since September. Yeah. The Blu-ray came out, and like I'm going to watch this on Halloween. That's going to be my special Halloween events.
That made my excellent category. It could have easily made essential. It's very good. The WNUF, it's a little comedy, but it's 80 to 90% horror, and it's a faux news broadcast.
Yeah,
from the 10 o'clock news or whatever, and it also has these wonderful local commercials, and it's like it's filmed on VHS, like it was filmed off TV in like the late 80s or early 90s.
And that's what I'm really looking forward to, because I frequently plunder archive because people on archive.org just upload their vintage VHS recordings from TV. Like
I love that stuff.
You'll see like there's a video on archive.org, and it'll just say Nickelodeon September 10th 1993, and it's just like 2 hours of Nickelodeon that some guy recorded back in 1993, and it has all the commercials, all the original bumpers, and you just watch it's like you're watching TV again in 1993. It's great.
I love that, because the commercials and the bumpers and all that capture so much of the spirit of the times. It's
very different. It's a very different experience from just like watching it on DVD. I could watch. You can watch Golden Girls, season 1 on DVD, but that doesn't have the same feeling as watching a VHS recording with all and like. Especially if it's like an original broadcast on a broadcast network like NBC or ABC, you'd get those regional bumpers for like the news, and it's always, I love that, because the news bumpers and like tonight on WN11, like the manhunt continues for the escaped serial killer, and then like more on this at 11. And you're like, whoa, what happened? It gives you this like mystery, like, huh? What are they talking about? What happened back in 1993? Escaped killer? Like, where was this taped? I want to know more about that. Stuff like that. It's great. I prefer, like, if I can go and I could watch, like the Garfield Halloween special on DVD, or I can go on archive.org and find a VHS recording of it from 1985 when it originally aired on ABC.
Right.
And like that's so much more nostalgic and so much more fun.
I absolutely want the old commercials and all that. Yeah, it's just there's something about it. But yeah, the WNUF Halloween special makes a lot of lists of the best found footage out there. I want to see Ghost Watch very badly. I can't find it, but I would like to see it.
I'm going to look and see if I can find a link to it, and you can watch it. But yeah, it's because it hasn't been released in Region 1. I think because it was a BBC broadcast, it's kind of stuck in some sort of like international rights limbo, and that's why we haven't gotten it.
It's another one of those shows that kind of had a War of the Worlds kind of thing going on around it. So they presented it
Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yeah, there's a parody couple of them in it as well. So if you know who the Warrens were, you're like that they're talking about. Yeah.
Basically they're the stars of the Conjuring film series. So most people know them from that. What's interesting about Ed and Lorraine Warren is obviously they had really long careers as paranormal investigators prior to the Conjuring films. So there's a couple movies based on them that you can watch that's kind of like pre-Conjuring movies.
Sure.
There's one called it was a made-for-TV movie with Kevin Bacon. I think it's called The Demon Possession Case, and it's pretty bad. And then there was another one made in the 90s that I really liked called The Haunted. It was another made-for-TV movie about the Warrens and one of their cases that I remember liking a lot when I was a kid in like 1992. Then I went back and rewatched it recently, and it doesn't hold up quite so well. But,
that's a shame when that happens. Yeah, it's better if you hadn't have seen it again. But yeah, they were. I could do a whole show on the Warrens. I went and read The Demonologist, and I've seen several of the movies and whatnot. They were involved in just dozens, if not hundreds, of paranormal investigation, and they were officially like they had a relationship with the Catholic Church where they would go in and check stuff out, and if they thought it was legit, they would call in the church for an exorcism. So they were involved with a lot of crap. But there's also controversy around them.
Yeah, there's a lot of they made that their career to sell books. So how much of it was fraud, how much of it was legit, who knows? But they make for entertaining movies. I'll give them that. So speaking of paranormal, though, you have Paranormal Activity on your essential list.
Of course, yeah. The first one. So that's also the reason there's a few on the essential because they broke ground and established sort of a subgenre within the found footage,
and then everybody exploited it and knocked it off and copied it. And like I said, like when we were talking about it earlier, is that once everybody copies it, it devalues the original because the original doesn't seem so special anymore. Like the first Paranormal Activity, provided you watch it with the original ending, that kills any chance of a sequel. If you just watch it as a standalone film with the original ending where everybody dies, then it's actually
I haven't seen it. The only ending I've ever seen is where she sort of lunges at the camera at the end.
Yeah, that really stupid ending. So what they did was they changed the ending, an initial run of the movie, which had the original ending where she slits her throat and dies. And so both the husband and the wife die at the end of the movie. And that's it. But once they landed with a Hollywood studio for distribution, the studio's like, oh, this has franchise potential. Change the ending so that she lives and we'll do sequels. And that's what they did. And then we're on like Paranormal Activity 7, I think, at this point.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I mean, I've watched all of the Paranormal Activity movies. I like them, but as we talked about earlier, so when you keep adding to the mythology of a film franchise, sooner or later it collapses under the weight of the mythology, and that's starting to be what happens with Paranormal Activity. But the first couple of Paranormal Activities where it was just an invisible, awful, unknown presence in the home caught on cameras doing increasingly creepy and dangerous stuff is a very effective formula.
It is. I mean, so when it starts out, like, so Paranormal Activity 1, when it starts out, it's just like the door to their bedroom kind of like creaks on its own, something really, really subtle. But then it escalates at such a steady clip that when it gets to the part where she gets pulled by her leg out of bed and into the hallway, like that is really like, whoa, that works so well because it gradually builds up to it, and you feel the legitimacy of the intensity building and building of this haunting, where it's going from just noises to actual physical like assault.
Right.
And it does, all these movies, they do kind of go off the rails at the end because they want to have like a big final act finish, and that's understandable. Right. So they start out, a lot of people complain about these. Oh, the movie felt so realistic until the ending where it went crazy. Like if it didn't have something crazy happen at the end, then it wouldn't have, a conclusion. It's still a movie. It's still got to do something, big for the finish. And I thought the first Paranormal Activity is good. Don't like the sequels. Like you said, they try to turn it into some sort of huge mythology. It's like the Saw movies. The first Saw is really good. And it's a very simple movie. It hardly has any gore in it.
That's one franchise I've never checked out.
It's if you get into it for the mythology, which a lot of people do, then you'll like the franchise. But if you got into it the way I did, where I enjoyed the first movie, and then they started making a bunch of sequels that were bad, and then I kind of fell out of it. The first movie is it's James Wan, and that guy just makes good movies. I've liked so many of the stuff he's done.
Now, did he just direct Malignant? Did you check out Malignant?
Yeah, I have not seen Malignant yet.
It's a fun movie.
Yeah, a couple of my friends, we do a weekly horror stream called the Kinonomicon on YouTube, and they were talking about Malignant. They'd seen it, but I hadn't. And they're telling me to go check it out. So
it's
I do intend to watch it.
It's fun, and the third act turns it up to 80s level of horror movie fun. So. Yeah, but anyway, all right. So Paranormal Activity, the first one made the list, and Essential. Now, all the Paranormal Activity movies are on this list, but Paranormal Activity is another one of those movies that made my Essential list, because it's like if you don't know anything about paranormal or about found footage movies, these are the ones I'm like, go watch these. And if you watch these on the Essential list, that'll kind of tell you if you like found footage or not. That's kind of where I'm coming from with the Essential list.
I'm scrolling through your list. Have you seen the Poughkeepsie tapes?
Yeah, that's on here. That's the one about the serial killer, right?
Yeah. So I watched that one recently, and it's a movie that was very heavily hyped because it was kept out of circulation for supposedly being too real, and then that you finally watch it and you realize, oh no, it's
I was disappointed with it after all the hype.
It doesn't live up to its own hype. But if you try to separate it from the hype and just watch it as it is, it's still pretty average. I mean, it's not like last broadcast levels of boring, but Poughkeepsie tapes is the thing that's off-putting about the Poughkeepsie tapes is that it's a found footage movie, but shot by the killer, who's a serial killer. Right. But he abducts and tortures women, and so it falls into that kind of like Saw. The genre is called torture porn, and it falls into that kind of like faux snuff torture porn. I mean, I'm just saying, it's like that, and it's like, all right, this movie is just kind of gross and weird, and I'm not enjoying it. The
interesting thing to me about the Poughkeepsie tapes, and it kept showing up on the best of found footage lists, so I finally checked it out. And because I kind of consider myself a found footage aficionado now. I guess I've seen enough.
Yeah, you got to watch all the ones that are recommended. Even if you don't end up liking them, you still should check them out just to see if you like them.
So the only thing that was really interesting to me about the Poughkeepsie tapes was the interviews with the guy where they kept talking about, is this authentic or not? I thought that was kind of interesting, like his thought process. Like the FBI, whoever he was, the expert on was this real or not. And two, the way that the bad guy plays the long game with law enforcement, I thought was really interesting. Other than that, it wasn't remarkable to me as a found footage movie.
It has some scenes in it where like the scene where he's abducting the little girl, like that one is like
that's awful.
That is, I mean, it's very unpleasant to watch, but it is shot really well, and that's the only part of the movie I felt lived up to the hype of being too real, supposedly, because that did feel very authentic in the worst kind of way. But the rest of the stuff where he's like got the women chained up in the basement and he's torturing them, that's really hammy and overdone. Yeah, that one was a letdown.
I think the best example of, and I'm not a torture porn guy, but there's a couple on here just because they popped up when I'm like, oh, it's another found footage movie I haven't seen. There's one called The House of a Thousand Eyes.
I haven't seen that one.
And that's where this husband and wife that capture and torture people to death in very brutal and awful ways. They just have cameras set up all over the house. And that one was hard to watch, but I forced myself to finish it because I wanted to, review it and everything. But that's probably the best example on here of what would be called torture porn.
Yeah, that's an intersection of genres that I don't enjoy. Like I like Cloverfield, an intersection of found footage and giant monster movies. Torture porn and found footage, though, that's where it kind of gets into like, all right, this is just really annoying and unpleasant.
So I'll point out a couple other movies on here, and I know you need to get going, but Lake Mungo is not really a found footage movie, but it's a faux documentary that has that realistic, like this is up close and personal feel. And it kept showing up on best of lists, and I thought Lake Mungo was fantastic. It's different. There's no other movie on this list like Lake Mungo. So
that's another one that I've had it on my Amazon wish list for years, and I've been meaning to get it, and I just haven't gotten around to it. I know what you're talking about. Is that it's one that everybody says is really good.
Yeah,
so.
and it is. It stands up to the hype. It's not as scary as it is impactful, and it's about like I said, I put in my thing. It's about grief, secrets, ghosts, the complexities of family. It's just amazing. It's not really a horror movie. It's more of a dark fantasy, modern fantasy. Have you seen Troll Hunter?
Troll Hunter, yeah, I have seen that one. That's another one where
great movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like Cloverfield in that it's a mixture of giant monsters and found footage, and it works so well. It also feels like, I don't know, and because it was filmed in Sweden, where the entire troll mythology comes from, it feels really authentic.
I think it's actually Norway, but it's one of those countries.
Norway, I'm sorry. Yeah, Norway. All those Icelandic countries. Yeah, no, Norway. And it almost feels like a piece of heritage that you're watching. It's cultural heritage. It's like a celebration of it, but done in such an entertaining way. It's a great film.
Yeah, Troll Hunters I can't recommend enough. Kind of go through here and pick out a couple other movies that I think people should check out. Now, I think, Apollo 18 is not a great example of the best found footage horror movie ever made. This made my excellent, or I think it made my great list, which is the next. You go essential, then great. But what is so good about Apollo 18 to me is they really went into detail on what all the stuff looked like if you went on one of those lunar landing missions. So you get a really good insight into what it was like for the astronauts to be in the capsule and, like bumping their heads when they're waking up and stuff like that in the gear they had and all that. I thought that was really good. Area 51, it's kind of a horror movie, but it's got sci-fi overtones where these kids break into and it's more of a bigger budget Hollywood kind of movie.
Yeah, I mean, so alien invasion and found footage as a crossover of genres, and you'd think that there'd be more of them, and you'd think they'd be better. So I've seen a few. There's actually one that predates. It's from the '80s, so it predates the found footage thing entirely. But it's called the McPherson tapes, and I remember that one really well because everyone thought it was real. The director who did it promoted it as real. I think Sightings in the 90s did an episode about it, and there's all these debates over whether the footage was real or not. And it turns out it was just a movie. You can actually pick it up from Vinegar Syndrome on Blu-ray.
How funny!
It's not a great movie as itself as a movie. It was more about tricking people. It's almost like you're watching a prank. So it worked better as a prank than as a movie. I still think that the best found footage alien invasion film is the segment from VHS 2 about the kids having like a sleepover.
Right.
And the aliens with the dog who has the camera on its back. Yeah. Like that one is
that
done
ending.
really well. Oh, the ending is so sad. Yeah, I don't like that.
I hate that ending. Yeah, I hate that ending a lot. But it's done really well.
Yeah.
I mean, it is one of the subgenres of found footage of, hey, there's lights in the sky. Now there's aliens, but it's not. I think you don't see it as much because it takes more budget. And
it does to do all that stuff. But then again, the VHS segments.
it
hardly shows anything. I mean, you just need lights to come down. You just have to have a lighting rig, I guess.
Okay.
But the way it did some of those effects that were so they worked so well was like the part where they're all hiding out in the woods, right? And they know that the aliens are out there somewhere, and they're like, be quiet, be quiet. And suddenly they see these flashing red and blue lights, and they hear like a police car siren. They just see the lights and hear the siren, and so like, the cops are here, and they all come running out into the open field, and then all those lights and sounds shut off all at once. And they're like, what happened?
What just happened?
And the aliens come and like attack them, and it's like, wow, that's really, really effective. It costs no money at all to do that. It's such a simple effect. You realize the aliens were tricking them into coming out. But it worked so well. It's the creepiest part of that entire segment in the movie. So I think it can be done. Alien invasion, found footage movies without much of a budget. No one's really done it as a full length film that I've enjoyed.
There's a few of them out there, but it's not my favorite type of found footage. But I think that that segment from the VHS movie, I think, is one of the better examples. There's that scene on the dock where it's crawling after him on the dock or whatever. And you touch on something I think that is very important to found footage and horror movies in general, but definitely for found footage, and that is, to me, less is more. Like, do little creepy, suggestive stuff and let the imagination fill the rest in. And I think that works really well for found footage. Now there's nothing wrong with a moment of pure crazy, but if you like that little door in Paranormal Activity, that's so effective because your brain is like, imagining all this horrible stuff around it.
Well, everyone, the chief complaint about the Blair Witch Project is that you never see the witch. In fact, you never see anything.
That's the powerful part.
Because I know so many people when it first came out, and they said like, "No, you see the witch. It's there in the woods when they're running. You can see it for a second. She's never there. It's all the power of suggestion. You think you see her, and that's what works so well." Yeah,
that is. Stephen King famously talks about how the monster behind the door is scarier than the monster you see, but that's actually one of my complaints with the sequel they did. Was they show you little hints of the witch and her grotesque body and stuff, and it's like, I don't know, leave it, let my brain make it worse than what you show me. But speaking of extraterrestrial stuff, one of the bigger budget movies out there is, have you seen The Fourth Kind with Mila Jovovich?
I actually did not see that one because it had Mila Jovovich in it. I really don't like her.
She's not doing her normal character, but there's some interesting stuff as a big budget found footage movie. It's done pretty well. It just has this really weird scene at the end where Mila and the director are talking to each other as themselves at the end of the movie, and I still don't know what the heck that was about. So, have you seen either of the Creep movies?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I would check out the Creep movies. They get a lot of hype, and they are good, although I think Creep 2 is better.
I didn't see them on your list, but you may want to check out The Houses October Built. They made 2 of those so far, and they're really interesting because they're movies they're more a faux documentary than a found footage movie.
Right.
But they're about the crazy regional haunted house experiences, like the Halloween haunted houses, like, fun house kind of things,
right.
With that people put on, and they're all actual regional haunted houses and spook houses that people put up. So it's like a real documentary. They're going and they're showcasing all these actual haunted house experiences around the country, but they sew them together with this narrative about a cult. So they'll be interviewing the actual people who run the haunted houses and asking them about, like, oh, when did you get started, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and have you heard about so and so? And the people giving the interview like, Oh yeah, I think I've heard of them. They don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
Because,
Yeah, they just don't want to appear clueless.
but their reactions are always real because they're like, I think I've heard of them, and everyone says something different. Like when they say they heard, like, I think I've heard of them. Don't they have a haunted house over in Connecticut? Or like, oh, are those guys from Texas? They something like that. And they end up sewing it together into a coherent movie that's also a documentary about regional spook houses. And they've made 2 of them so far, and they're really interesting. I recommend them.
I will check those out. I've seen them come up on like recommended movies and things like that. So there's an interesting, it's kind of found footage, it's kind of not. Have you seen Savage Land?
No.
Okay, I recommend it. It's like, you talk about trying to get creative. So it's a documentary about like something happened overnight where like everybody in a small, like, I think it's like an Arizona town, maybe a New Mexico town, everybody dies, is like murdered in a brutal fashion. And the only clue to what happened is they find a roll of film that's got like 20-something pictures on it. And it kind of gives you little moments, little slices of moments of what happened during the entire attack. And it's really good.
Called it the Savage Land?
It's called Savage Land, yeah.
Savage Land. Okay, I'll check that one out. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's a good movie, but what makes it interesting is that they experimented a little bit, and they basically, you could call it a found photo.
A found photo movie. Okay.
Yeah, but it's a documentary, and it's got some like political overtones in it that you'll see. But it's done really, really well. I liked it a lot. I'm wanting to mention a couple more movies here, and I know you got to go. So this is an interesting point. Comedy is hard to do, right?
Yeah.
Found footage comedy must be almost impossible because there's a few found footage comedy movies on here, and most of them are real stinkers. The only 2 that I thought were at least gave me a couple of chuckles. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say, isn't This Is Spinal Tap technically a found footage comedy movie?
Okay, yeah, it's a faux documentary. Yeah. Okay, that would make it censure if it was on the list. I'm talking about, people are like, hey, I've got a camera, let's go make a found footage movie.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah. There's one that's actually just called found footage. And I'm
like a spoof, right?
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's great, but I will say that the 3 main characters are idiots, and they made me laugh a couple of times. There's another one. This one is more... so it's called Found Footage 3D. And it's a found footage movie within a found footage movie. Okay? So let me try to explain it. So my review was a group of filmmakers decides to make a 3D found footage flick. This one is a meta send-up of found footage tropes wrapped around a decent horror movie. So it's fun if you put yourself in the right headspace, and it never lets you forget a 3D found footage movie is kind of hard to justify narratively. So what happens is the guy, you got a director who's ready to direct a movie, and then you got the producer who's the money guy, right?
Yeah.
So the producer goes out and buys a 3D camera. And he's like, we're doing 3D found footage. And like the whole movie, they keep having conversations around how do you justify narratively that we're doing a found footage 3D movie. So what ends up happening is the meta story is a comedy about all just the ridiculous stuff. Like the guy's ex-wife is one of the actresses, and there's just all this human drama that's really funny. But there's actually really a horror movie going on that none of them are noticing that's happening in parallel. So it's a really gory horror movie, but it's also a comedy.
It sounds really ambitious, like it's trying to do a whole lot of stuff. Does it pull it off?
I think so. I'm not saying it's the best movie ever made, but I think it does pretty well. So, and when the crap finally hits the fan, it turns into a horror movie. But they'll do stuff like, you in a horror movie, you always have the harbinger where they stop at a gas station or a general store. So they're just grabbing people as they go to do stuff. And they're like, hey, they see these couple of guys standing at, outside an old general store or something, gas station. They're like, hey, do you guys mind if we film you? You're like, locals would be good for our movie. Can you just tell us, oh, no, you don't want to go to wherever? And they give them a name. Right? The guy's like, oh, yeah, don't go there. And they're having a hard time getting the guys to act, but they finally get them to act. And when they're done acting, but the cameras are still on, and the guys are like, oh, so where are y'all going? And they're like, oh, we're going up to the old whatever place. And the guys get really nervous, and they're like, no, you really don't want to go up there. So it's like they're totally poking fun in a very obvious way at all the tropes. But it's worth watching. The Hell House movies on Shudder, the first two are worth watching. The third one just gets kind of crazy. And then last, we could talk about so much more. I want to point out there's a series of movies that this guy named Nigel Bach is making. Have you seen these Bad Ben movies?
No, I saw you put them all down as terrible, though.
Yeah, but
bottom of your list.
Well, some of them are average, some of them are terrible. They're a guilty pleasure. Okay, so it's a guy doing extremely low budget found footage movies using his own house over and over and over and over and over.
Oh, wow.
Now, one of them, he's like an Uber driver called The Haunted Highway. But what happened was he made Bad Ben for a very low budget in his own house. And when it came out, people thought it was funny. But he hadn't intended to make a comedy movie. But he's like, hey, if that's what works. So then he kind of leans into that. And a few of the entries later are just outright horror, but most of them have a lot of comedy worked into it as well. And I'm not going to say they're amazing movies, but they kind of grow on you a little bit. And like, I watch them. I try to watch all of them that come out. And the guy, like I said, he puts them out on Amazon. His name's Nigel Bach. And he's just having fun. Like one of them, he does Bad Ben, the Mandela Effect. And he's like, okay. And so he's like, all these different horror stories are happening in this house in different dimensions, different multiverses. So it's an anthology movie of different spooky stuff happening in the same house. So it's worth pointing out because the guy's having fun and he's doing fun stuff. And he's up to like movie 8 or 9 now. So, I would recommend checking out Bad Ben, just for the guy's out there. He's out there doing it. So, and then probably, go ahead.
One that's not on your list because it's not a movie, but there is found footage in as a genre. It kind of got out of the theaters, out of the standard movie experience, and it sort of exploded on YouTube and places like that. And found footage as a genre kind of evolved into the alternate reality games we were talking about, the ARGs. And there's one that sort of kicked it off. It's called Marble Hornets. And
I've seen Marble Hornets, or I've seen a Marble Hornets movie. They have like a series of them now, right?
Yeah. They did the series first, and they did the movie to try and make some money because all the videos on YouTube were for free. So the movie's kind of panned, but you can watch all the videos on YouTube. And Marble Hornets is interesting. It's a case where once they got too ambitious, that's actually when it started to get kind of bad. Because the first season of videos, and each video is between sometimes it's 30 seconds and sometimes it's 6 minutes. But the first season of Marble Hornets, the videos don't have any dialogue. They're just the camera footage and along with some overlay text to provide context of what's going on.
That's some of the best stuff. Yeah.
And that's when it's really effective. But when season 2 and 3, they got more ambitious and they try to act. And that's when, the whole thing falls apart because you realize they're acting and they're doing it poorly. And so the whole, this is found footage experience falls apart. But that first season, though, of Marble Hornets is really effective in the same way of the Blair Witch Project, where they really don't show you anything. It's kind of about the Slender Man because they were made at the time when Slender Man was And they're trying to explore these just backwoods in the middle of nowhere, these abandoned houses, and you can tell that they're actually going into real abandoned houses they probably shouldn't and filming in there. It's got kind of a guerrilla filmmaking style because they're just filming out in the streets, and it's really raw and authentic. And very effective, that first season of Marble Hornets. And I recommend that to people, and then just keep watching for as long as you can stand the acting after that.
Okay.
But it's evolved into a new genre right now that's called where people are doing these analog horror is what it's called.
Okay.
And it's really hard. It's kind of hard to define, but it's about using retro technology like VHS tapes and cassette tapes and things like that to tell an altered reality horror story. And it's very specific about the way it is. I watched a documentary that tried to break the genre down, and I still don't think I quite understand what makes something an analog horror specifically. But it's an evolution of the found footage and AR, where you watch a videotape, right? That's made to look like an authentic recording. And it's kind of like Ghost Watch and the WNUF Halloween special, where they're made to look like original 1980s recordings of a TV broadcast. And as you're watching it, you can tell that something isn't right. Like there's this one channel, the name's escaping me, but they do all these fake VHS tapes that are like educational tapes that look like local, regional tourist guides. And they start out normal, like, come see our scenic town, come visit our beaches. But as like the story goes along, come visit our gallows, and like come visit the pit of despair, or like something like that, where it just like things you start realizing like things are really wrong. Like this whatever town or world this is like isn't right. There's something like really spooky going on. And it's an evolution of what found footage started and what the other genres kind of took it, and that's kind of where it is now. And I recommend looking that stuff up, analog horror.
I love that stuff.
With it.
Yeah, it almost, I love it. I mean, what you're explaining is right up my alley. I love that kind of thing. So I will definitely check that out, and I'll check out Marble Hornets. You actually, by bringing that up, you reminded me that I watched Always Watching, a Marble Hornet story, and then I didn't make a review of it, so I need to add that. But those, I love that kind of thing, especially I've seen some stuff where I think they found the original equipment and filmed it in the original equipment. So it's like, like they found it on VHS tape and that kind of, VHS.
The channel I'm talking about, I just looked it up on my YouTube subscriptions. It's called Eventide Media Center. So go look up Eventide Media Center and watch a bunch of their videos. They're a great example of what I'm talking about.
So they're creepy. If they're not in your face, but they're creepy. Okay, I love it. All right, so the last thing here I'll point out, I do have some. I do have kind of bad and bad on my thing. Some of the kind of bad are Chupacabra territory. The Crescent Moon Clown, that's actually from Nigel Bott in the Bad Bin series. That one's just bad. I don't recommend that one. Jack Hunter's Paranoid tapes, just weird. He's got two of them, or I don't even know who Jack Hunter is. The Wood Witch, alternately Wood Witch the Awakening, run from that one. And then bad, we have 616 Paranormal Incident, Spirit in the Woods, and Hide the Monster. And I want to call out Hide the Monster. It is the supreme example of somebody going, I can do one of these found footage movies, grabbing a couple of their friends or whatever and a camera. And it isn't necessarily bad. It's dull, bad, cringy, just bad. So if people want to take my pick for... Now, there's plenty of bad found footage movies out there. There are a lot of bad found footage. A lot of my average stuff other people would consider bad. But Hide the Monster is just... It's a perfect example of people not knowing what they're thinking, they can make a found footage movie and they can't. So
well, yeah, and I've seen a few. I've seen a lot that are like that. What's interesting though is that found footage, while it's very big in the United States, it has shown up in other countries. We're talking about Troll Hunter from Norway, but Japan has there's found footage J horror.
yeah, and it's good too.
Yeah, some of it's really good. Noroi, the Curse.
That's
I
on
think
my
that was on
list.
your list.
Yeah,
that one was
movie.
surprisingly good. I've seen that some of that director's other movies, and I think he tends to fumble at in the last act. Though he doesn't always end his movies very well. He did another movie called The Cult that had a similar bad ending. But Noroi is probably his best one. That's an excellent film.
Is that the cool thing to say J horror, or do I sound like a jackass?
No, that's the nomenclature for
okay,
it.
so J horror. So you had The Ring, and you had not The Ring. What was the one where it's at the house if you go into it?
Oh, Ju-on the Grudge.
Ju-on the Grudge. So he made some like independent or straight to TV or something specials or movies of The Grudge before the motion picture stuff was done.
Yeah.
And those
he made several of them, yeah.
Yeah, and they're pretty good, and they're not found footage, but they feel like found footage, if that makes any sense. So I really liked those a lot.
And there's a series of anthology horror films, J horror films from the 80s and early 90s that I really like. You can find them on DVD for like $5. They're called Scary True Stories. Not a great title. But it's a trilogy of anthology horror films, and the third one has a found footage segment, years before the Blair Witch Project, and it's about these kids exploring a haunted house in Japan, and with their camera, and it's really, really good and really effective. If you just want to see, Japanese, it's very specific. We call it J horror just because there's something about the way the Japanese do their ghost stories, their haunted house films, that's just different than the way we do it. It has they're all kind of feel the same in a way. I mean, the directors all put their own unique flourishes on it, but stuff like Ju-on, The Ring, Jurei, all these Japanese ghost movies, Sweet Home, that's a really good one. House. The Japanese version from the 70s, like they're all just very specific in the way that they do their rules for how they do a haunted house movie, and that separates them from how we do haunted house movies. So it's interesting to watch a found footage Japanese horror flick, a haunted house flick that's done in a found footage style. And I just like those movies in general.
Everything I've seen of J horror or whatever, everything I can find, I really like a lot. I don't think I've seen anything that, even the stuff that wasn't good.
There's crap. I mean, there's total crap in there. Don't worry. Yeah, it's funny because when you start getting into a genre, you always start with the best movies and then you're like, wow, like this is great. All these movies are great. And then you do it. When you get deeper and deeper, you start finding like, oh, the good movies are fewer and far between. And then you start discovering the real garbage. And J horror, you'll get there eventually in J horror where you're going to start finding a lot of bad movies.
Yeah, found footage, you'll get there quick. So I'm more forgiving on it than a lot of people are, I think. So, but I'm like, whoa. So, but I'm always up for, I've got a list of found footage movies that I still want to see, and if anybody has one they want me to check out, just tweet me at Shane Plays or email me at Shane at shaneplays.com. So, all right, man. Well, I'm going to let you go. But I really appreciate all of your time. This has been really cool. And thanks for all the tips. I've written down the stuff that you've recommended. But folks, you can go to shaneplays.com and you can find this. It's the found footage movie list, mostly horror. And there's a few non-horror in there. There's like End of Watch, which is a cop show. There's every now and then you'll come across a non-horror or non at least suspense found footage, but they are very few and far between. I also want to point out that I was very disappointed with M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit. I almost had to force myself to keep watching it. So I was surprised because I usually like M. Night Shyamalan.
I mean, so The Visit, the problem with The Visit is that just like every other M. Night Shyamalan movie, is that the only thing about it is the twist. And if you know the twist before going into the movie, it's like you don't even need to bother watching the movie.
Have you seen Old yet?
Old? I have not seen that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. So I like Shyamalan. I mean, he's not always great, but when he's great, he's very good. You know, in my opinion. But yeah, he's not always strong. And I'm also, I think season 6 of American Horror Story, about half of it is found footage, which I haven't. I'm just now working my way through American Horror Story, but I'm looking forward to getting to that season. So, all right, man. I did this for you. I always do a bad joke, and I picked out one just for you, man.
Okay.
Because I know you love The Simpsons.
Oh boy.
Or at least you retweet them a lot.
I do.
Why couldn't Homer Simpson make guacamole?
Why?
Because he forgot the avocado.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
That was like season 25 of The Simpsons level bad.
Yeah. I got another one for you. We'll probably guess this one. What video game system does Homer Simpson play?
Nintendo.
Yeah, Nintendo. That's right, sir. All right, Mark Pellegrini, horror, bottomless pit, comic book writer, fiction writer, man among men, cat owner, cat of Goblin. How can people find you? What's your preferred way of people finding you?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is Pellegrini. Or you can just type in Kamen America into Google and you'll find me eventually. I am attached to anything Kamen America, and that's a pretty specific name. So
right, and that's K-A, in case people don't know.
Yes.
K-A-M-E-N, like Kamen Rider. K-A-M-E-N space America. And Pele Creepy is P-E-L-L-E-C-R-E-E-P-Y.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, man. Well, I appreciate you. And I'll let you know when this podcast drops. And keep enjoying. I'm really excited for you to see the WNUF Halloween special.
I'm excited for it too. That's going to make this year's Halloween for me.
And thanks for that. I saw where you sent a message about Ghostwatch, so I'm very excited to check that out. So, all right, man. Well, take care, and everybody else, we will catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. Shane Plays is also carried on sci-fi.radio. Sci-fi.radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi. SCIFI.radio. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.